What's up, guys? So a while ago, I made a article about emotionally guarded placements in astrology and the natal chart. So I want to go over that today and talk about some. So first, let's start with Capricorn Moon. Well, first of all, what does it mean to be emotionally guarded? What am I referring to? Well, certain placements in your birth chart can make you someone who guards your emotions. Someone who doesn't open up as fast, someone who might have issues with vulnerability and kind of showing your true self, showing your cards, etc. Right? It's just exactly what it sounds like, emotionally guarded. So how can you tell if someone's emotionally guarded? Well, I gave some placements, and I'll kind of break them down how I felt and how I feel now. And, I've done this before where I have the thing on my cell phone. So first one is obviously a big one, Capricorn Moon. So Capricorn Moon can be very emotionally guarded because it takes a long time for them to trust. A lot of times they have had childhoods or early experiences that where they have to really where there wasn't always unconditional love and where they have to work really really hard to gain any kind of a lot of times they didn't really have that nurturing given to them, that warm nurturing that they needed when they're younger. So they become very, very self reliant, and sometimes it can push them towards being very perfectionist and self-critical. And it just takes more for them to show. It's not that they don't have emotions; they can be super emotional people, but they feel a great duty to others, and sometimes it just takes them longer to open up. So see, feels emotionally deeply but doesn't trust them. Feels emotions deeply but doesn't trust them. Grew up believing vulnerability is a weakness. Yeah, that's another thing about Capricorn Moon is that sometimes they feel like they're the ones that always have to kind of have like the face show the face of strength, of resilience. Like nothing can hurt them. A lot of people see them that way. Like they look at them and they're always shocked, right, when they're told like this when people are always shocked when a Capricorn Moon has been struggling because they always look at that person. It's like, oh, this is a person that can handle everything, etc. So yeah, and it is a tough moon sign, right? They don't give up, and yeah, a lot of them do have, especially men, they will have a lot of them that just like I can't show weakness or um. So it gets tough when there are emotional struggles because they can tend to keep a lot of stuff in. It's ruled by Saturn, which was rock. The moon slash emotions are more like Cancer, water. So it's like flow. It's like water sectors that you know that need to be kind of just flow through you. And you can imagine like almost a symbolic metaphor, uh, rock kind of blocking the flow, and they're here to alchemize those, and to be able to kind of open up to people. And the more Capricorn Moon opens up and starts to realize that they're not terminally unique, like their problems are not making, the more that they can start to just normalize them in whatever way, through therapy, um, in any kind of like meeting context, whatever, right? Like that's how Capricorn Moons heal is by seeing that they're actually super normal, and not anything to be, they don't have anything to be ashamed of. So yeah. Next one, let's just stay on this subject and let's go Scorpio Moon. Um, so I have to write down the times as usual. One of these kinds of articles. So Scorpio Moon, let's see. So it feels everything intensely, but hides it as a form of power. Fear of betrayal runs deep. If they open up, they risk inhalation. Defense mechanisms are emotional walls, testing others before trusting, and being secretive. So yeah, with Scorpio Moons, it's like this. It's like obviously, it's another one like with Capricorn Moon. I wrote an article about this a while ago where it's way easier typically for a woman to have this in today's world because it can that watery emotional sensitivity can be expressed easier, especially when they're kids developmentally. There's a point where boys are playing sports and girls are typically, you know, having play dates or whatever, eh, the female emotional development is, yeah, it's more develop, or I guess like psychological development has more of an emotional development side than the men's typically, right? I guess you could say sometimes it's different. It's not always like that, but Scorpio Moon, a lot of times they grew up in kind of seeing the uglier side, the more cynical side of reality from a young age. It might be their family, where maybe they had like a manipulative parent, or someone who used psychological power struggles to kind of make the world not really feel like a safe place. They could have had like a very, even like a birthing process that was difficult. Um, but they become very wise, very like natural psychologists at a young age. So they're always like really like their eyes are open. They're really analyzing, um, and kind of like looking at everyone, right? And I think that there's a big amount of trust that's needed for a Scorpio moon to like really, really open up and to really feel like, because the emotional need of a Scorpio moon is to be able to kind of like let all their darkness out, and or be able to have people around them where they can just like let everything out, where they don't have to hold that anything in. They can just say what it is. But it can be a struggle. And especially like I said, especially for men, and obviously it totally depends on the different aspects to the moon and whatnot. But just in general, it's a lot of emotional transformation that has to happen, and a lot of letting go that has to happen. And because it's a moon and so internalized, sometimes it's not something that's understood or seen. So they can really like lock up a lot of emotions, and these emotions still are super, super powerful and can be very destructive, or the opposite, right? Or they can use it for creativity, use it for like this really intense internal power to overcome obstacles and kind of go through the scorpionic transformation. But in bad cases, low vibe cases, it can be someone who is obsessed with power, who can't let go of control, who's manipulative, who uses their advanced emotional intelligence to kind of get what they want, so they can never have to lose control, and kind of has pushed away their emotions, and just use defense mechanisms to push them away to avoid them their whole life, right? So it kind of becomes like a way of living. So yeah, it's definitely not an easy one. Okay, switching it up a little bit. South Node in the 12th house. Interesting. I had this one. I wrote, these people have a subconscious tendency to retreat from emotional connection. They may feel more comfortable in solitude, keeping their inner world hidden from others. Expressing emotions and getting close to people can feel foreign or unnecessary to them. They instinctively keep their feelings private, even when they crave more depth and closeness. I mean, I could probably add South Node in the 8th house to this, so let's just do that. Basically, like a water South Node. You could even say like Pisces plus Scorpio South Node too. And basically, like you have someone who, in the case of like the more 12th house Pisces, there can just, like I said, there can just be a tendency to retreat when things get tough, or there can be a karmic tendency to sort of run away from problems and not face them head on. Kind of, there can be like some delusion, or just like this thought of like, my life, yeah, things are just going to work out. But when it comes to being emotionally guarded, things can just feel like a lot for these people, like even regardless of their charts, like they can really feel like a lot is on the line when they put themselves out there. So um, you know when a lot of times, like if they get hurt one time, and especially with the Scorpio, if they get hurt one time, they can kind of like just go into that isolation or isolatory way of being. And then if you kind of combine that, if you look at the more Scorpio one, Scorpio South Node or 8th house South Node, maybe I remember why it was on this list. I just think that it kind of goes with the whole Scorpio symbolism of usually a very intense childhood, and that kind of matches the karma or past lives, whatever you want to say. And then they don't have this real. They're trying to move into Taurus. They're trying to move into second house. They're trying to move into like stability, into like more about being more peaceful in this lifetime. But um, you know, or more present, more at peace. But sometimes it can just be, something that feels a bit repressed, or where it's hard to get there. And sometimes they'll like want to rock the emotional boat. So yeah, I mean, these ones are a little bit more forward and can definitely work in different ways. But okay, now I'm kind of getting at it. This is, yeah, now I remember why I didn't have the Scorpio one in here, because it's definitely more the Pisces one. You live and you learn. But it really just is like, yeah, the Neptunian tendency to kind of hide, and to kind of um be in the background. 12th house represents kind of the background, being behind the scenes, etc. So they might feel more comfortable in that position. Um, okay. Next, I mean, I have multiple. Okay, let's go with Lilith in the first house slash rising. So yeah, Lilith in the first house is naturally very private. Let's see, they have an aura of mystery and intensity, making them both intriguing and intimidating. They don't like feeling emotionally exposed and can be very rebellious when it comes to showing vulnerability. Even when deeply connected to someone, they prefer to maintain a sense of control. They've likely learned that emotions can be weaponized, so they tend to choose to keep theirs private. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else I would add. Like, yeah, Lilith rising can definitely have a lot of firepower, and sometimes they can get projected on a lot as well. I feel like, Lilith does also represent kind of what is repressed by society. So when you have someone that wears that on their sleeve, and that's kind of how they're seen, it's very exposed. So they can feel very exposed and feel like people are kind of like casting them, or just kind of like putting them in a box. So yeah, they might just not want to show it to other people. Okay. um. So yeah, I already talked about Capricorn Moon, but like then I talked also about Saturn Moon aspects. I could have made it the same one, but I guess I'll kind of have to make this up as I go. But I would say, with Saturn Moon, it's just like, Saturn conjunct Moon, Saturn square Moon, Saturn opposite Moon, Saturn conjunct Moon. It's that same type of energy as the Capricorn Moon, where there's some form of, early childhood issues around expressing the true self. Usually, they come from a very perfectionist family, where you kind of really have to show how you are, how good you are at things, whether it's school or sports or whatever, and they usually didn't feel like they just were able to receive love and nurturing freely, so they can be very emotionally guarded as adults. It's not an easy one at all. I think that because when you combine Moon with Saturn in a hard aspect, it can create melancholy, right? So it can create social issues, social developmental issues, self-esteem issues, shyness. I mean, it really takes that person the first 30 years, 29 and a half, or whatever you want to call it, the Saturn return, to truly grow into themselves, and a lot of times to really come out of their shell. So that can lead to all kinds of developmental issues if you're someone who, lots of self, a lot of a lot of conflict around, not being good enough, or, very self-critical, perfectionism, all that stuff. And yeah, they can just be very, very structured, and depending on the moons, like I know someone who has Virgo moon exactly conjunct Saturn, like same degree, like everything exactly the same. And, I can tell even at his age that he just isn't he's someone who has like a lot of these like emotional patterns that have repeated throughout his life, that have caused a lot of chaos, but he just refuses. And it's also, this guy has like Pluto aspects too to his sun, but he refuses to kind of like truly look at it. And that's kind of like what the Saturn can do, is it can bring like it can cause people to kind of repress, where it's like, okay, well, it's easier to blame other people. And karmically, obviously Saturn, the planet of karma, conjunct the moon. I mean, it really depends on the whole chart. You should get a reading with me, to know your whole blueprint and how everything kind of works together. But um, I think that it's not even my phone. My grandpa's house right now. But I don't know if you guys hear it from here. But anyways, there's some level of like karmic repression or something that needs to be done around going into the true emotions, and yeah, so usually something that's been held back on that more karmic level. Okay, next. I wrote Moon in Aquarius. So Moon in Aquarius, and kind of air. I guess you could add like Gemini also, but we're doing more. We're just doing Aquarius. Here they, so air moons in general tend to intellectualize emotions, but especially Aquarius, yeah, they can be quite detached from their emotional expression, so they don't typically like being overly sensitive or vulnerable, and they can kind of keep their emotions at a safe distance, right? So this can be quite challenging, as you know, there can be a certain aloofness to Aquarius placements in general, and I think Aquarius Moon definitely. Let's see, I wrote, while they form strong connections, they often need space to and avoid emotional, intense conversations that force them to be too open. Yeah. Um, so it's just that's just the vibe of Aquarius. Aquarius is about space. Aquarius is about individualism, and Aquarius is about freedom. And it's not the most emotional sign. It doesn't mean that they don't have emotions. They're super, they really, really care about the world, and they can have great relationships. It's just that when you're dealing with, Aquarius Sun or Aquarius Moon in any way, it's Aquarius energy in general, the more pressure you put on them to open up and to, or not even just open up, the more to just like be a certain person to you, or to kind of show up a certain way, I guess. They really don't like that. They like freedom. They're kind of like aliens. They kind of operate at their own frequency of time. I feel like the Uranians, they really work at what's it called, divine timing, and that can be very, that can be kind of frustrating for some who want more reliability, who want more someone who's kind of consistent or even somewhat consistent. It's not always the case, right? But um your best bet with Aquarius placements, especially the moon, is to not, to be very good on your own, and to not take it personally. They might take a lot more time to process something, and you might ask them about something, and they might not have, it might take them like 7 months to process something. Like, let's say a Cancer moon might process right away. So it can really, it can feel like they just don't care. Um, and are just like on a different, type of timing. And that's like what I hear a lot about people who, whether it's Aquarius Sun or Moon, people who have problems with them, whether it's like relationships or anything like that, is like they feel like they don't care. But then you talk to people with these placements, and they always say the same thing. It's not that they don't care; it's just that they need time to process. They need to kind of step away from things, and when there's a lot of pressure, which they might feel pressure in a lot of a more different way, because Aquarius Moon is a need for freedom and need for individuality, right? So they might, um, kind of move away from emotions because of that. Okay. Um, Next, Saturn in the fifth. Well, actually, let's do it differently. Saturn in water signs. How about that? I'll do a new one today. Um, so yeah, when you have Saturn in water signs, it's or even Saturn in water signs plus houses. So in Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces, or fourth, eighth, 12th, there's a lot of karma around trying to master emotions, or master, like, for example, for Cancer. But what happens is that there's restriction in those areas. So in Cancer, there's restriction around how one is, a lot of times with their family, and with how they can kind of relate emotionally. The first 30 years can be very challenging. They might have some big fears that they kind of shy away from, but the goal is for them to actually become masters in that. And that can also come from familial problems, right? And then, with Scorpio, there can be lots of fears, lots of deep fears about the unknown, the unseen. Also Pisces, right? Eighth house, 12th house too, right? Where it's like they, can just have like different phobias, or different ways that they feel held back from taking that, like, eighth house Scorpio, emotional kind of energetic evolution. That real kind of what the eighth house is asking for, which is death, rebirth, transformation. Well, Saturn can restrict that, or hold it back, so it takes a lot more time for it to happen. Um, So, and same with Scorpio, right? So I think for people like that, they really, it's a very, very tough to have Saturn water signs, because it's like you have to become a master at something where you have a lot of karmic fears, or very unconscious karmic fears in the Scorpio example, like it could be about death, it could be something about sex, it could be anything that's, about the esoteric occult. Then 12th house Pisces could be, around spirituality, around the meaning of life, around God, around ultimately truly allowing that more esoteric, unseen, unconscious realms, around like really opening up towards those. So yeah, and then I would say also, yeah, with Pisces, there can be escapist tendencies that could keep people kind of hidden away from really confronting like what's there in that 12th house. And yeah, I mean, the goal is to kind of become like a grounded mystic in a way. And in Scorpio, it's really about overcoming and having that evolution, that ability to kind of let go. But as you can see, like the water energy with Saturn is tough when it comes to emotional expression. On the subject of Saturn, I might as well talk about Saturn in the fifth house. So let's see, I wrote, this placement makes people naturally reserved in matters of romance/fun and self-expression. It'd be hard for them to allow their inner child energy out. They often feel like they need permission to be open and playful, which can make them hold back in relationships, especially to start. They're slow to reveal their emotions because they fear rejection or not being taken seriously. So, yeah, I mean, that's the thing with Saturn fifth house, is like fifth house also rules the beginning stages of dating and courting, or whatever you want to call it. Um, so, people with that placement, obviously you have to take into consideration the whole chart, but they might take that too seriously. Um, and, even like their fun can be like very structured. But yeah, as it relates to emotional expression, like I think, fifth house does, like I said, does rule that initial stage, and kind of how you let yourself go at parties and stuff like that. So if you have Saturn there, it might be a little bit more tricky to just let yourself go and have fun. Maybe it's less emotional, but it's still, I definitely still see it correlating. Um, let's see here. Mm-mm. So Venus, um, square slash hard aspect Saturn. I wrote, doesn't believe it's lovable as is. They learn that love is conditional or earned, and they can fear rejection or being seen as a burden. So yeah, like Venus with Saturn is tough because Venus represents self-love. Also, it comes out as love and relationships. So a lot of people who have like a tough Saturn impacting their Venus, or Saturn the seventh or something like that, like they can just have issues around self-love, around like being good enough, and it can really kind of push back emotional expression, because they can feel a sense of shyness, or a sense of like like when self-love is something that's tougher to come around, it becomes projected, so if like you don't feel like what you have to say, or your, like, I guess, value as a human is like what you have to offer someone else is as high as it probably is in real life, right? Then you might just kind of hold back from laying that out, and that can be really tough for relationships, which then has like a spiraling effect, because it's one of those things where like developmentally, a lot of people who have this, they kind of, not all the time, but they have to work really, really hard at love, and they can kind of shut themselves down from it, I guess. So yeah. Um, let's see what I want to do next. Yeah, so we can do 12th house moon, and so 12th house moon, let's see. Everything that feels everything but doesn't know how to express it. Emotions are abstract, unconscious, or linked to past life slash family karma. Can feel like they're drowning in feeling with no language for it. And there can be lots of isolation and emotional escapism, and even avoidance. Yeah, so Yeah, 12th house moon is tricky. They have a huge need to kind of withdraw from the world in 12th house places in general. So, when your moon's there, a lot of your emotional energy, you have a big emotional need to kind of have time alone and to kind of like be in your own energy because you're very, very sensitive to energy, right? And like I said there, like, expressing emotions can be tough. So sometimes people with that, they will be quite guarded. And a lot of times there could be something with, a lot of times it's the mother, but um something that happened that kind of would have pushed that person to kind of feel like they need to stay in the background. But it's very karmic too, right? So the key is through service, um, and doing things for other people. They kind of unlock things in themselves. But yeah, it's tough. That it's really tough for them to find the language to kind of describe the reality, what they're going through, and a sort of karmic heaviness as well, right? And also like this feeling of confusion, this vagueness, emotional vagueness, energetic vagueness, life direction. Just a lot of times their energy also can be very consistent, like their physical slash psychic slash emotional energy, like and they're so sensitive to people around them that it's like a big risk. It feels like a big risk for them to truly open up, and yeah, so talking to a lot of 12th house moon clients and people, it is one of those placements that once they have found some type of form of spirituality, whatever that means to them, things tend to open up a lot more, and there's more of like a normalization around like why they are the way they are, I guess, or like why they kind of respond to stimuli in that way, but it can be quite confusing beforehand. Let's see. So I wrote Chiron conjunct Moon. Um, so this placement carries deep emotional wounds, often connected to childhood experiences that made them feel unprotected or emotionally exposed, and they don't just trust easily. Yeah, it's true. Like Chiron on the moon is not easy. Moon is early nurturing, and what makes you comfortable. So these people are great healers, but like for most great healers, they have to go through some type of big challenge or even trauma, whether it's emotional, psychological, whatever, to kind of learn the empathy, gain the empathy they have. So having it at the lunar level, it just kind of indicates that someone carries, whatever that Chiron slash moon sign is in, and whatever aspects, like the wound is very deep, and at the very core level of the human. So obviously, until that is healed, they will there'll be more of kind of it'll be more painful to kind of put themselves out there and risk getting even more hurt, right? So let's see. So the one really doesn't come easily, as it's something they had to learn the hard way. They might have been in situations where expressing their emotions led to rejection or feeling like they were too much. So they learn to guard themselves and almost shut their emotional gifts down. Even when they do open up, there's often a lingering fear that the other person won't truly get it. Yeah, perfectly said. Like, it's almost like a emotional PTSD at times where, yeah, you're just kind of nervous because of past experiences that by opening up and by being your true self, that something bad will happen. That's kind of the theme of most of these here. Mm-mm. No, I missed my 12th house moon one. I had one written over here. It's a small version. Okay, talk about that. Let's see over here. Mm-mm. Hold on, let me grab this list. Well, I think I'll leave it there. Actually, wait. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Let me know what you guys think about these. Obviously, there's a lot more than just these ones. And like I always say, if you want to get a reading with me, jesseannisonastrology.com, book it directly. It's, I go all out for every reading. Um, whether it's live or recorded, I go, I never really time it. It just goes for how long it has to go. Natal readings, compatibility. I do everything with compatibility. I love doing those live, a lot of those lately. And of course, I do, astrocartography, the local and the international, the big one that everyone knows about, but also local, understanding like where you should live in your own and where you shouldn't live, where you should visit in your own area, right? Family readings, child readings, obviously astrological forecasts, the year ahead, current weather, but I prefer when people have had their nail chart done with me before that. But maybe I'll start moving away from that and just start doing it for people. But I really do like doing the nail before. And yeah, and then I teach astrology one-on-one, people at all levels, So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye bye. Ciao.